The Pontiac Silverdome cost $55 million to build. It was sold for $583,000, less than most houses in Detroit. It is not an outlier. It is a predictable outcome of a deal structure that American cities have been agreeing to for decades. Since the year 2000 alone, states and municipalities across the country have directed $43.1 billion in public funds toward professional sports stadiums. Almost every one of those deals was sold to the public with the same set of promises: economic growth, new jobs, revitalized neighborhoods. Independent economists, reviewing the actual outcomes, have found those promises consistently failed to materialize. The way these deals are presented and the way they actually function are not the same thing. A franchise owner tells a city the current stadium is no longer adequate. A new one is needed. If the city cannot help finance it, the team may need to consider its options elsewhere. City officials who do not want to be the politicians who lost the team begin looking for a way to cover the cost. The most common instrument is tax-exempt municipal bond. The city borrows at reduced interest rates, reduced because bond buyers receive a federal tax exemption on their returns, and uses the proceeds to fund construction. The debt is then repaid over 20 to 30 years through hotel taxes, sales taxes, or general city revenue. The franchise gets a new building. The public carries the debt for a generation. Because repayment is stretched across decades and distributed over a broad tax base, the individual annual cost to any one resident is usually small enough that it rarely generates organized. The benefit, meanwhile, flows almost entirely to the franchise owner. Concentrated gain for one party, diffuse cost spread across hundreds of thousands of people. That is why these deals keep getting approved. You can fit most of a city council in the owner's luxury box. You cannot fit a majority of the electorate. Between 1987 and 1999, 55 stadiums and arenas were built or renovated in the United States at a combined direct cost of more than $8.7 billion. About 57% of that, roughly $5 billion, came from taxpayers. Those figures cover only direct construction. They exclude road improvements, utility upgrades, and the compounding interest on long-term bonds. The true cost is always higher than the number in the press release. Between 1970 and 2020, state and local governments put $33 billion into major league sports venues across the United States and Canada. The median public contribution over that 50-year period covered 73% of each venue's construction costs. In the 1970s, the public share approached 100%. Even as stadium costs grew dramatically in later decades, taxpayers remained the majority funder in most deals. The economic research on what cities actually receive in return is extensive. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis examined it. The Brookings Institution examined it. Researchers at Kennesaw State University, the University of Maryland, and West Virginia University all examined it. Their findings are, by the standards of economic research, unusually consistent. A 2017 survey found that 83% of economists polled believed the public cost of a stadium subsidy outweighed the economic benefits. That level of agreement is rare in a field where significant disagreement is the norm. The core problem is what economists call the substitution effect. Spending at a stadium does not represent new economic activity. It represents reallocated activity. A family that attends a game is spending money it would have spent somewhere else: a restaurant, a movie, a night out. Sports spending does not generate new dollars in the local economy. It moves existing dollars from one location to another. J. Sill Bradbury, an economics professor at Kennesaw State University, put it plainly: the observed spending on tickets, concessions, and so on is not stimulated new spending. It's reallocated existing spending. This applies to all stadiums and arenas of any sport. Michael Leeds, a sports economist at Temple University, studied the combined economic impact of all 5 major professional sports teams in Chicago: the Cubs, the White Sox, the Bears, the Blackhawks, and the Bulls. 5 franchises. more than 250 home games per year across all five. His finding, their combined presence affected Chicago's broader economy by less than 1%. For a city hosting a single NFL team, 8 regular season home games per year, the numbers are smaller still. A typical NFL team employs between 125 and 175 full-time staff. On game days, it brings in approximately 2,000 part-time workers for roughly 4 hours, 10 times a year. As a share of its host city's total economy, a franchise contributes somewhere between 1/3 and 1/20 of 1% of local GDP. The stadium is a very expensive building for what is, by most economic measures, a modest-sized enterprise. The Brookings Institution ran the numbers on Baltimore's Camden Yards, the 1990s ballpark widely held as a model for publicly supported stadium development. Net annual gain to Baltimore's economy in new jobs and incremental tax revenue, approximately $3 million. The public investment, $200 million. At $3 million a year, the city would need more than 66 years to break even before accounting for interest. The public cost per Baltimore household for Camden Yards came to about $15 a year. When each taxpayer loses $15 annually, there is little incentive to organize opposition. When an ownership group stands to gain hundreds of millions of dollars in franchise value, there is substantial incentive to lobby, advertise, and spend on political relationships. The gap in financial stakes produces a gap in political effort, and that gap explains, more than anything else, why these deals keep getting approved. When stadium funding does go directly to voters, the outcome is less predictable. In April of 2024, Kansas City residents voted on a proposed sales tax increase to finance a new ballpark for the Royals. 58% voted no, despite the team's ownership pledging to cover roughly half of the more than $2 billion projected cost. Most stadium deals, however, are not put to a public vote. They move through city councils and state legislatures where franchise representatives have spent months cultivating the relationships that matter. Underlying nearly every negotiation is the same threat, spoken or not: fund the stadium, or the team considers its options. Professional sports leagues in the United States operate as limited monopolies. The number of franchises is fixed. Cities that want a major league team cannot turn to a competing supplier. When a franchise signals willingness to relocate, other cities begin making offers, and the competition between them drives subsidy levels upward with each new round. The Oakland Raiders demonstrated how this plays out across multiple cycles. The franchise played at the Oakland Coliseum from 1966 until 1981, when owner Al Davis moved to Los Angeles after Oakland declined to expand the stadium's luxury seating. Davis returned in 1996 after Oakland agreed to a $200 million renovation, 22,000 new seats, an enclosed outfield, and a massive upper deck that fans called Mount Davis. The renovation blocked the panoramic views of the Oakland Hills that had defined the stadium, produced sightlines poorly suited to baseball, and created a capacity the Raiders never consistently filled. By 2013, they were covering sections of Mount Davis with tarps. In 2020, the franchise relocated to Las Vegas, into Allegiant Stadium, a $1.9 billion facility financed in part by $750 million in Nevada hotel taxes. Oakland is, as described by authors Andy Dolich and Dave Newhouse, the only city in America to have been abandoned by the same team twice. The Raiders extracted a major renovation, played for roughly 2 more decades, and left for a city willing to spend more. The formula was identical both times. The Oakland Athletics played at the Coliseum through the 2024 season, nearly 6 decades of baseball in a stadium that had, by its final years, become known for sparse attendance, deteriorating facilities, and the possums that reportedly inhabited parts of the structure. The team announced its relocation to Las Vegas in November of 2023. A new $1.5 billion ballpark on the Strip is projected to open in 2028. Oakland's share of the Coliseum's 155-acre site sold in 2024 for a minimum of $105 million. Demolition of the stadium is planned to follow. Then there is the Silverdome. Built for $55 million in public funds, opened in 1975, the stadium hosted the Detroit Lions for 26 seasons, Super Bowl XVI, WrestleMania III, 4 FIFA World Cup matches, the first ever played indoors, concerts by Led Zeppelin, Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson. At its peak, it was the largest stadium in the NFL. When the Lions relocated to Ford Field in downtown Detroit in 2002, the Silverdome had no anchor tenant, and without one, no sustainable revenue. In 2009, the city auctioned it for $583,000. A subsequent owner spent $6 million on renovations. The roof collapsed in 2013. Demolition was attempted in 2017. Approximately 10% of the explosive charges failed to detonate due to a wiring problem, and the building remained standing after the initial blast. They finished the job the following day. By March of 2018, the last wall was gone. An Amazon distribution center now occupies the site. $55 million in public money. Sold for $583,000. Now a warehouse. Chicago's version of this story is less visible, which makes it more instructive. In 2002, the city financed $387 million of a $587 million renovation to Soldier Field, home of the Bears, a stadium built in 1924, through municipal bonds backed by a tourism tax. 20 years later, an investigation by NBC Chicago News found that the city still owed $640 million on that original borrowing. Years of deferred payments had caused the outstanding balance to exceed the amount initially borrowed. The city declined to comment. By 2023, the Bears had purchased a former horse racing facility in Arlington Heights as a potential site for a new stadium. The Illinois Sports Facilities Authority still owed $589 million on the Soldier Field bonds, with payments running through 2032. The previous debt was not yet retired. The conversation about financing the next stadium had already begun. A city pays for a renovation. The team plays there for 2 decades. The team indicates it may need something newer. The city starts negotiating again, while still paying for the last deal. Nashville approved $760 million in city bonds and $500 million in state bonds toward a new $2.1 billion stadium for the Tennessee Titans in 2023, the largest public commitment to an NFL stadium on record. As a condition of the deal, the Titans retired the remaining $30 million of public debt on their previous stadium, which had opened in 1999. Then the clock started on the next 30 years of payments. The Buffalo Bills broke ground on a new stadium the same year. Initial projected cost, $1.4 billion. By August, cost overruns had pushed the estimate to nearly $1.7 billion. New York State and Erie County are contributing approximately $850 million. Of the 30 current NFL stadiums, exactly 3 were built with entirely private funding: SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, and Gillette Stadium in Massachusetts. The other 27 received public subsidies. The justifications offered for those subsidies have not changed in decades: job creation, tourism, civic pride, economic development. The fiscal impact reports produced by franchise ownership to support these claims have been evaluated by independent economists and found, repeatedly, to be unreliable. Victor Matheson, an economist at the College of the Holy Cross, reviewed those reports and concluded they have been shown to suffer from significant theoretical flaws that make their conclusions suspect at best and simply false at worst. 2 analytical failures appear consistently. The first is an inflated multiplier, the claim that each dollar spent at the stadium generates more than $1 of broader economic activity. Independent measurement does not support this. Consumer spending on sports is substitutional, not additive. The second failure is geographic. When fans travel from across a metropolitan region to attend a game, the spending they do near the stadium appears as a local gain in the team's economic model. What that model does not account for is the corresponding reduction in spending in the communities those fans came from. Arlington, Texas records economic activity from Cowboys games at AT&T Stadium. The surrounding communities from which those fans drove record the loss. The regional total is unchanged. Alan Sanderson, an economist at the University of Chicago, put it this way: a city would achieve a greater stimulative effect on its local economy by distributing $1 billion directly to residents than by building a new stadium. 3 factors explain why public subsidies persist despite this evidence: politics, incentive structure, and leverage. On the political side, Michael Leeds put it directly: sports occupy a much bigger space in our lives than their financial footprints would dictate. That makes things difficult for a politician. You don't want to be the mayor who lost Team X. A team's departure is immediate, visible, and politically damaging. The long-term cost of the debt that kept the team is slow, diffuse, and someone else's problem by the time the bill peaks. On incentive structure, the benefit of a stadium deal flows to a small number of people, primarily the ownership group, whose franchise value increases substantially with a new facility. The cost flows to every taxpayer in the city or state in annual increments small enough that most residents never directly feel them. People who stand to gain enormously from a deal have far more reason to fight for it than people who stand to lose $15 a year have to fight against it. On leverage, franchises can move. Cities cannot manufacture competing leagues. The STU, double way after dress. Louis Rams relocated to Los Angeles in 2016, and the NFL and the team ultimately paid the city a $790 million settlement. Most relocations do not end that way. Most cities absorb the loss, retire the debt on the empty stadium over the remaining years of the bond schedule, and eventually begin the conversation about what comes next. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. IOB. Louis found that cities which invested heavily in professional sports facilities experienced, on average, slower income growth than cities that did not. Not faster, slower. The public dollars committed to stadium debt are not available for schools, fire departments, public transit, or infrastructure that serves residents every day rather than 8 Sundays a year. John Siegfried and Andrew Zimbalist wrote in 2000, "Few fields of empirical economic research offer virtual unanimity of findings." Yet independent work on the economic impact of stadiums and arenas has uniformly found that there is no statistically significant positive correlation between sports facility construction and economic development. That was written 25 years ago. It has not been revised since. The Silverdome sold for less than a house. Chicago owes more than it borrowed. Oakland lost the same team twice and watched the second one follow the first to Las Vegas. Nashville just committed more than $1 billion public dollars to a stadium whose debt will still be on the books long after every official who approved it has left office. And somewhere right now, a team owner is sitting across from a city official, explaining that the current stadium is no longer adequate.